The food born from survival, the true history of yogurt. Before yogurt became a modern breakfast food, before it appeared in colorful grocery store cups, before it was blended into smoothies, layered with fruit, or praised as a healthy snack, it began in a much older world. It began in the age when humans were learning how to live differently. This was the Neolithic era, thousands of years before modern cities, supermarkets, refrigerators, and written recipes. It was the era when human beings began moving away from a life of constant hunting and gathering. They started settling in villages. They learned how to grow crops. They began raising animals. And one of the greatest discoveries of that time was that animals could provide more than meat, hides, and bones. They could provide milk. That discovery changed human history. Milk gave early people a new kind of food. It was rich, nourishing, and available again and again from living animals such as goats, sheep, cattle, and later buffalo, camels, and horses. But milk also came with a serious problem. It spoiled quickly, especially in warm climates. There were no refrigerators. There were no sealed cartons. There were no cold storage rooms. In the heat of the ancient world, fresh milk could change within hours. For early farmers and herders, this was a challenge. Milk was too valuable to waste, but it could not stay fresh for long. Then, somewhere in the ancient milk-producing regions of the world, something surprising happened. Warm milk was placed in a container. Maybe it was a clay pot. Maybe it was a leather pouch. Maybe it was a bag made from animal skin. The milk sat in the heat. Natural bacteria entered it. Time passed, and instead of turning completely rotten, the milk changed into something thick, sour, smooth, and edible. That was the beginning of yogurt. The exact first bowl of yogurt is impossible to identify. There is no name of one inventor, no single village, and no written record saying, "This is where yogurt began." But based on the history of animal domestication and early dairy use, yogurt likely started around 5000 BCE, during the Neolithic period, in the broad region that included Mesopotamia, Anatolia, Central Asia, and nearby herding lands. These places were some of the earliest centers of farming, animal raising, and milk use. Mesopotamia, the land between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, was one of the great cradles of civilization. Anatolia, which is modern-day Turkey, was a major crossroads between Asia and Europe and an early center of agriculture. Central Asia, with its grasslands and nomadic herders, became one of the most important regions for fermented dairy foods. In all these places, people lived close to animals, used milk, and needed ways to preserve it. So yogurt was not born from luxury. It was born from survival. The first yogurt may have happened by accident, but its value was quickly understood. Early people noticed that milk could thicken and sour in a pleasant way. They learned that this thickened milk lasted longer than fresh milk. They learned that it could be carried during travel. They learned that it could be eaten plain, mixed with other foods, or saved to start another batch. This was one of humanity's earliest food technologies. The people of the Neolithic era did not know about bacteria. They had no microscopes. They did not know the words fermentation, lactic acid, or microorganism. But they understood what they saw. They understood that warm milk could transform. They understood that a spoonful of yesterday's good batch could help make tomorrow's batch. They understood that some natural changes preserved food instead of destroying it. That knowledge was passed from hand to hand, family to family, and generation to generation. The science behind yogurt is simple but powerful. Milk contains a natural sugar called lactose. When the right bacteria enter the milk, They feed on that lactose. As they feed, they produce lactic acid. This acid changes the structure of the milk proteins, causing the milk to thicken. It also gives yogurt its sharp, tangy flavor. The acid environment makes it harder for many harmful organisms to grow, which helps yogurt last longer than fresh milk. To ancient people, it may have seemed almost magical, but it was nature working with human observation. Around 5000 BCE, early herders and farmers were already living with milk-producing animals. Goats and sheep were among the earliest animals used for milk. Cattle were also becoming important. These animals provided food in a way that could be renewed. Instead of killing the animal once for meat, people could milk the animal again and again. This made dairy incredibly valuable. But once milk became common, preservation became necessary. That is where yogurt entered history. The first era of yogurt was the Neolithic era, the age of farming and animal domestication. The first regions were likely the ancient dairy belt of Southwest Asia, Central Asia, Anatolia, and Mesopotamia. The first makers were not chefs or scientists. They were herders, farmers, mothers, travelers, and families trying to protect their food. The first container may have been an animal skin bag. This detail is important because animal skin containers were commonly used by ancient herders. Milk placed inside these containers could pick up natural enzymes and bacteria. If the container was carried under the sun or tied to a moving animal, the warmth and motion helped the milk ferment. After several hours, the milk could become thicker and sourer. Someone had to taste it. That person may never have been remembered by name, but their courage helped begin one of the oldest food traditions in the world. Over time, early people learned how to control the process. They learned which containers worked best. They learned how warm the milk should be. They learned how long it should rest. They learned that saving a small amount from a good batch could help create another good batch. This practice became the foundation of yogurt making. A little yogurt from yesterday became the starter for today. This is why yogurt is a living tradition. It is not just a food. It is a chain. One batch leads to another. One household teaches another. One generation continues what the last generation knew. As human communities spread and changed, yogurt spread too. By the Bronze Age, roughly from 3000 BCE to 1200 BCE, fermented milk foods were already important across many herding societies. In the grasslands of Eurasia and Central Asia, people depended heavily on animals. Their lives were mobile. They moved with their herds. They could not rely only on planted crops, so animal products became essential. For these nomadic communities, yogurt and other fermented milk foods were extremely practical. Fresh milk was difficult to carry for long periods, but fermented milk lasted longer. It could be eaten fresh or dried into hard pieces. It could be mixed with water to make a drink. It could be turned into soups. It could feed children, adults, elders, and travelers. In Central Asia, fermented dairy became part of everyday survival. People used milk from sheep, goats, cows, horses, camels, and yaks depending on the region. They created many different forms of sour milk, dried curds, and fermented drinks. Yogurt-like foods were not just side dishes, they were essential travel foods. Imagine a family crossing the open steppe thousands of years ago. There are no roads like we know today, no stores, no packaged meals, no refrigeration. Their animals walk beside them. Their food must be portable, durable, and nourishing. A skin bag of fermented milk, a pouch of dried yogurt curds, or a bowl of sour milk could mean strength for another day of travel. This was yogurt's early power. It helped people move. It helped people survive. It turned fragile milk into food that could travel. As yogurt-like foods spread west and south, they became important in the Middle East. In ancient and later Middle Eastern food traditions, yogurt became a natural companion to grains, herbs, vegetables, and meats. It cooled hot foods. It balanced strong spices. It added sourness, richness, and body to meals. In warm climates, yogurt was refreshing. Mixed with water and salt, it became a cooling drink. Mixed with cucumber, herbs, or garlic, it became a light dish. Stirred carefully into soups, it became a creamy base. Served with bread, it became a simple meal. In the Middle East, yogurt became more than preserved milk. It became part of hospitality and home cooking. A bowl of yogurt could sit beside rice, lamb, flatbread, lentils, or vegetables. It was humble, but important. It could feed the poor, refresh the traveler, and complete a meal for the wealthy. Few foods could move so easily between simple homes and refined kitchens. In South Asia, especially in India, yogurt became deeply rooted in daily life. Known widely as curd or dahi, it became a household staple. Indian families used it with rice, in drinks, in marinades, in sauces, and in cooling dishes. In a hot climate, yogurt had both practical and cultural value. It helped balance spicy foods and gave meals a refreshing quality. The making of curd became a familiar home ritual. Milk was boiled, cooled, mixed with a spoonful of starter, covered and left overnight. By morning it had set. This method was repeated in homes for generations. The process was simple, but it required experience. The milk could not be too hot, or it would damage the starter. It could not be too cold, or it would not set well. The vessel had to rest quietly. This was traditional knowledge at its best. It was not written in a science book. It was learned by watching. A child would see a grandmother test the milk with her finger. A daughter would learn when to add the starter. A family would know which corner of the house stayed warm enough overnight. This is how yogurt history lived, not only in ancient records but in everyday habits. In the Mediterranean world, fermented milk foods were also known, though yogurt was more strongly associated with herding regions than with some city-based cultures. Greek and Roman writers described sour or thickened milk used by pastoral peoples. To many settled city dwellers, these fermented dairy foods were linked to shepherds, mountain people, and communities outside the urban centers. But those shepherds understood something vital. They understood how to keep milk useful. Throughout history, some of the most important food discoveries came from people living close to animals and land. Yogurt is one of those discoveries. It did not begin in a palace. It began among people who milked animals, carried food, watched the weather, and understood the value of every drop. As time moved into the medieval period, yogurt became strongly connected with Turkic peoples and their food culture. The word yogurt itself is linked to Turkish language roots connected with thickening, curdling, or working milk into a denser form. By the 11th century, around the 1000s CE, yogurt was already known and named in Turkic writings and traditions. This gives yogurt history an important medieval milestone. By the 11th century, yogurt was no longer just an unnamed fermented milk. It had a recognized identity in Turkic culture. As Turkic peoples moved across Central Asia and into Anatolia, they carried their food traditions with them. Anatolia, modern-day Turkey, became one of yogurt's great historical homes. Its location made it a bridge between Central Asia, the Middle East, the Mediterranean, and Europe. Ideas, foods, languages, and traditions passed through Anatolia for centuries. Yogurt fit perfectly into this crossroads. It could be eaten with meat, grains, vegetables, herbs, and bread. It could be made thick or thin, plain or seasoned, fresh or strained. During the Seljuk period and later the Ottoman Empire, yogurt became even more widespread. The Ottoman Empire, which rose in the late 13th century and lasted until the early 20th century, ruled over large parts of Anatolia, the Balkans, the Middle East, and North Africa. Within this vast empire, yogurt moved through palace kitchens, military kitchens, markets, villages, and family homes. It became part of everyday meals and refined cooking. Ottoman cuisine used yogurt in many ways. It could be served beside grilled meats, stirred into soups, mixed with garlic, spooned over dumplings, blended into drinks, or strained into thicker forms. Yogurt was practical enough for common people and elegant enough for courtly cuisine. This period helped spread yogurt across the Balkans, including regions that are now Bulgaria, Greece, Albania, Serbia, and surrounding countries. In Bulgaria, yogurt developed a particularly strong identity. Bulgarian yogurt became known for its sharp flavor and traditional culture. Families made it at home. Villages kept their own methods. It became a food tied to health, strength, and rural life. This Bulgarian connection would become extremely important in the modern scientific story of yogurt. For centuries, yogurt remained mostly a local or regional food. It was made at home, sold in markets, or prepared by herders and families. It was not yet a global packaged product. In many parts of Western Europe, yogurt was still unfamiliar or seen as a specialty food from the East, the Balkans, or the Ottoman world. Then, the modern scientific age changed everything. During the 19th century, scientists began understanding the role of microorganisms in fermentation. This was a major shift in food history. People had been fermenting foods for thousands of years, but now science could finally explain how it worked. Bread, wine, beer, vinegar, cheese, pickles, and yogurt were all connected by the invisible activity of microbes. Yogurt was no longer only a traditional food, it became a scientific subject. In the early 20th century, yogurt gained attention in Europe as a food connected to digestion and long life. Scientists studied the bacteria in fermented milk. Bulgarian yogurt became especially famous because of its connection to lactic acid bacteria and the reputation of rural communities known for eating fermented dairy regularly. Around 1905, a Bulgarian researcher identified one of the key bacteria associated with traditional yogurt. This helped explain the process behind yogurt's fermentation and gave modern science a clearer understanding of what ancient people had been doing for thousands of years. This was a remarkable moment. The old village food met the microscope. For the first time, the invisible life inside yogurt was being named and studied. What grandmothers, herders, and village families had known through experience was now being explained through biology. Yogurt began to gain a new reputation. It was not only food, it was health food. It was linked with digestion, vitality, and longevity. This reputation helped yogurt move into Western Europe in a new way. People who had once seen it as foreign or unusual began to view it as modern and beneficial. One of the most important dates in commercial yogurt history is 1919. In that year, a yogurt company was founded in Barcelona, Spain, helping move yogurt from local tradition into modern production. Early commercial yogurt was often sold as a food for digestion and health. It was sometimes connected with pharmacies and medical advice rather than ordinary snack aisles. This is very different from how most people see yogurt today. At first, in the modern Western market, yogurt was not mainly a dessert or breakfast treat. It was promoted as something beneficial for the body. But as production improved, yogurt slowly entered grocery stores and ordinary homes. Pasteurized milk, controlled starter cultures, glass jars, refrigeration, and later plastic containers made it easier to produce yogurt consistently and sell it to more people. The ancient food was becoming industrial. By the middle of the 20th century, yogurt began spreading more widely through Europe and North America. But there was one problem. Many people who were not used to traditional yogurt found it too sour. Plain yogurt had a sharp taste. So companies began changing it for modern consumers. They added fruit. They added sugar. They added vanilla, strawberry, peach, blueberry, and other flavors. This changed yogurt's image completely. The food that began as sour preserved milk became a sweet supermarket product. It entered lunchboxes, school cafeterias, diet plans, hospital menus, and breakfast tables. It became convenient, colorful, and easy to eat. By the 1960s, 1970s, and 1980s, yogurt became strongly linked with health, fitness, dieting, and modern nutrition. It was marketed as light, wholesome, and good for digestion. People began eating it not only because of tradition, but because it fit the lifestyle of the modern health-conscious consumer. Then came another major chapter: Greek-style yogurt. Although thick-strained yogurt had existed for centuries in the Mediterranean, Middle East, Central Asia, and the Balkans, it became internationally popular in the late 20th century and early 21st century. The method was not new. Traditional families had long strained yogurt through cloth to remove whey and make it thicker. In some places, this thick yogurt became labna. In others, it was served with honey, olive oil, herbs, or bread. Modern companies simply brought this old technique to a global audience. Greek-style yogurt became popular because it was creamy, rich, and high in protein. It felt traditional and modern at the same time. For many people, it made yogurt feel serious again, closer to food than dessert. This shows an important pattern in yogurt history. Ancient methods often return with modern names. What was once made in a village kitchen can later appear on a supermarket shelf as a premium product. Today, yogurt exists in many forms around the world. There is plain yogurt, Greek yogurt, Bulgarian yogurt, drinkable yogurt, frozen yogurt, probiotic yogurt, low-fat yogurt, full-fat yogurt, goat milk yogurt, sheep milk yogurt, buffalo milk yogurt, and plant-based yogurt made from coconut, soy, almond, oat, or cashew. But even with all these changes, the central idea remains ancient. Yogurt is still about fermentation. It is still about milk transformed by living cultures. It is still about time, warmth, and patience. When we trace yogurt's timeline, we can see how far it has traveled. Someone tasted it. Someone trusted it. Someone made it again. And from that small moment, one of the world's oldest and most enduring foods was born. Thank you very much. Please like, comment, and subscribe.